In 1974, I was a pharmacy student at the University of Utah, and one day I'd gone downtown for a dentist appointment, and I walked over to a city park. At the city park, I was ready to catch a city bus back up to campus, and instead a yellow Volkswagen came along. The bus was late and the Volkswagen pulled up. Cute driver rolled down the window and invited me to get in. He said he was going up to the U2. So I got in, but instead of taking me to campus, he drove me up a nearby canyon where I was assaulted and very nearly murdered.
Yeah.
Turned out my ride was Ted Bundy, who had already murdered like 11 women in Washington and Oregon by now.
And this was October of
Yeah.
74.
Yeah,
All right. Let's see. So in your book, you stated the countless missing bodies that were never found, and he took those secrets to the grave. But you didn't really elaborate when I was reading it. Can you go further on your opinion of that? Like, how do you feel, stuff like that, on how like no one really has found the ones that he, killed, and the missing bodies, the countless missing bodies that
Yeah,
never found.
it would be nice for the parents had he been upfront at the very end when he knew he was going to die anyway, and if he would have given better directions and been more helpful. So many parents are still wondering where their children are, and siblings are wondering where their sisters are.
Yeah. Well,
he was a jerk up until the very end.
He was yeah. Speaking of that too, is the end part of him. In '89, what was on January 24th? What was your thought process of that? You already know that it's him, stuff like that.
Yeah, I know that it's him, and I've watched the entire trial, and I've just been kind of waiting for the execution. And on that day, it was all over the news channels. A lot of people even went to the Utah prison, even though he was executed in Florida.
Yeah.
There still were a lot of people who protested and marched and held up Burn Bundy burn signs and things, even at the Utah one. So even the local news was carrying it big time. And when the smoke went up and they came out and announced that he was indeed gone now, it was not really a feeling of peace or retribution or whatever for my case, but I was glad that he would never be able to harm anyone again.
Huh. Have you, I don't want to say apologize, feels like a bad word, but come to terms fully with what all had happened?
No. Had he apologized at the very end, or been better with all the missing people, then I may be able to forgive him. But he was a jerk up to the very end. So.
Yeah. Let's see. You said certain events. This isn't really about Bundy per se, but you said certain events caused you. Oh yeah, it is. You said certain events caused you to share your story. What I was wondering what those events were.
Well, right after the event, I decided that the best option for me was just to never, ever, ever tell anybody. Take the secret to my grave. And I did that pretty much for I think it was 38 years or something before I decided to share my story. And what happened is that I had a new boss at work who decided he's going to clean house and kind of make their payroll cheaper by hiring people who've just barely out of school they can get for less money, and see if they can get all of these people who've been around for years and are making a lot of money to quit. And so he started by firing a bunch of people. And when it was my turn, he didn't have any reason to fire me, but he said that, Rhonda, I have evidence of you committing a very serious policy violation. This is so serious, I could fire you for it. And he showed me a picture of a girl holding something. He says, you see what she's holding? And I said, I don't know, could be a pen or a pencil or whatever. He said, that is a stick of red licorice. And look at this other picture. This is you. You're standing right by her and allowing her. You're the pharmacist on duty, allowing her to eat candy in the pharmacy. And I thought maybe he was joking because who gets fired for somebody else eating a piece of candy?
Yeah.
And they didn't fire me, but he yelled at me, and he used the same kind of voice inflection and tonal qualities and
And it just
degree
brought
of
you back to
anger and things that reminded me of when I was sitting on the floor in the canyon, crying and begging for my life, because Ted Bundy had said almost the exact same things.
mm,
And that put me in a instantaneous severe PTSD crisis where I was
yeah,
having flashbacks and all kinds of,
horrible things.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, can you explain how life was different? This isn't about Bundy, but you mentioned in your book too that your father had passed. Right after that, you also talked about how your mother took the role of both mother and had a job as well. How can you go into depth on how different life was right after that?
It was very, very different. Um, I have in my family two older brothers and one much younger sister. And then, of course, my parents. And when my father died, was killed in an airplane crash, small airplane crash. And when that happened, one brother was away at college already, and he came home, of course, for the funeral and things. But then shortly after that, he went back to college, just finished that quarter, and then he went on a 2-year mission for our church to South America.
Mhm.
So then I'd lost my father and my oldest brother. My next brother, I was a freshman in high school, and he was a junior. And the factory where my father used to work was right across the schoolyard. You could see it out most of the windows. And my brother was having a hard time dealing with my father's death, and he was just kind of sit all day and just stare out at the factory and not be
Be productive.
productive at all. Yeah. So my mother let him go and live with some parents out of state. And that meant I'd lost half of my family. I'd lost my dad and both of my brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Went from a family of 6 to a family of 3 just
Mm-hmm.
in a matter of a couple of months.
Yeah.
So then there was my mother, who's now working full time, uh, more than full time, probably 80 hours a week, I would imagine.
Jeez.
And my little sister, who was still preschool, she's like 12 years younger than me. I was 14 at the time, so she was like 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
She would go to a babysitter, and she would hate the babysitter and cry and cry and cry. And so if I wanted to go on a date or anything, my choice was either make her stay at the babysitter, which she hated, or take her with me. So it kind of altered my social life in high school. I was more just usually I just stayed home and
Introverted.
tended the kid. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough for sure. Um, you mentioned the person who inspired you to be a pharmacist, the female pharmacist. I don't think you ever said her name, but how did she really truly get you into pharmacy?
Well, in high school, but in those days, I graduated in 71, so 69, 70, 71. And before that, even women were supposed to just get married and
Mhm.
marry the doctor, the lawyer, or somebody who's going to
Yeah.
provide for you. And very few had jobs unless they were like my mother, who's a widow, and now she has to work all the time. And I decided that I did not want to be in a position like that where I would have to work to have to depend on somebody else, because they might get in an airplane one day and just crash, and who
Yeah.
knows. So, um, so I was thinking that I did not want to just be a housewife. I was looking at careers, and then most of the careers were things like stenographers and secretaries and nurses and school teachers. And
Mhm.
I didn't really want to be any of those. But all through high school, I took all of those kind of classes, shorthand and typing and things, so that I could be a secretary. Thought maybe I'd be a legal secretary. And then one day in shorthand class, I was, taking down this letter really fast, and I was thinking, I should be writing the letter. I should be dictating it. I shouldn't be writing it down. I could write my own letter. I don't need to write somebody else's letters.
Right.
And so that made me think that, I don't want one of these normal careers. What should I be? And my mom says, well, we got this lady pharmacist that comes in on Tuesday. I said, well, maybe I could be a pharmacist. By now, it's the last quarter of my senior year, and I haven't taken sciences and
Nothing at
things
all.
that you would normally need to take in
Yeah.
order to get into chemistry and physics and pharmacy. And I hadn't taken any of those sciences because I was busy taking office practice and office machines and
Preparing for
typing 1
like
and 2 and
technical
3.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you did the way you said it just now, you did meet her though, right? The
Yeah.
female
Yeah. I
pharmacist.
went in and talked to her and asked her if it was a good career. And
And
she said, oh,
she,
yes. And it's going to get better because there's a big pharmacy shortage. That was when we lived in a little town. We just had one little Rexall pharmacy. And
mhm,
most of the little towns had one little pharmacy. And this lady pharmacist would work 1 day a week in each of those little towns, while the pharmacist that's been there his whole life is taking a day off and fishing 1 day a week or whatever he
mhm,
wants to do. And I thought that's really cool because she's able to work in a relatively high paying job, have a career, and she can arrange it around her family. She can
mhm.
arrange her schedule not to work on days that her kids have piano lessons or
Yeah.
a dance concert or
Mhm.
something. She can go to parent teacher conferences, and she can be the mom and
Still.
still have her own career and be
Yeah.
a person who could provide for herself in case something ever happened.
And you really liked that freedom.
I liked that plan because I didn't want to have to depend on anybody, and I didn't want to teach children. I like
Yeah.
children, but not for very
Not
long.
to teach.
Yes.
Um, let's see. How many was pharmacy more of a male job at the time?
Yeah, there were I think about 8% of the pharmacists were female at that time. They're just barely starting to break into the pharmacy field. In my class, we had three, and we had a pretty big, that was a lot. We had three out of the class of 30.
Yeah.
So
Were
like
women.
10% or something. That was,
Were you ever ridiculed for that in your class or?
no, I was treated
Oh.
really nice until after the third year that you get your intern license and you can go and kind of do hands-on work in a pharmacy.
Uh,
And a couple of those that I went to had a hard time getting me hired. They would say,
mhm,
no, we don't hire women. We don't hire girls. You can't work here.
mhm.
Or they'd say, can you carry 4 cases of Coke syrup up and down the stairs when we need more Coke syrup? Can you go up and down the stairs carrying, you know, 80
Mhm.
pounds of Coke syrup?
Yeah, just busy
Well,
work.
yeah. So
Um, and other than Bundy, of course, was the University of Utah a pretty good school at the
it
time?
was wonderful. I had a wonderful, wonderful time there.
Yeah. Let's see. And then I have, in you say in the book you're a Mormon too. And of course, you touched on that too, how you're saving yourself for marriage, stuff like that. And then when Bundy happened, that I'm assuming, and it's a question as well, that was really a big factor of why it was so hard to tell somebody.
Certainly,
Yeah.
when I was growing up, the teachings in our church at that time, they changed a lot now, especially thank you to Elizabeth Smart for helping the church to kind of come around more. But at that time, the church teachings were that for a young woman, the most important and valuable thing that you own and can possess is your your chastity and your
Mhm.
purity. And if it came to a choice between giving up one of those or dying, that you would be better off spiritually and eternally if you didn't survive.
Mhm.
So they were kind of teaching you to, I don't know what they were teaching you, but it wasn't um, it didn't jive well with what had just happened to me, because then I
Mhm.
was feeling unworthy, and I've lost the most important thing that I ever could have, and why
Yeah.
should I even try anymore? Kind of.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you feel isolated like gradually after it happened from
yeah,
people?
yeah. And mostly I was at the beginning. I was doing it to myself, so I just
Yeah.
didn't want to see anybody, and I didn't want anybody to see me, and I didn't want to have anybody question. me at all. So I just kind of avoided people for a long time. And then later it wasn't really, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I do
You're
that.
good.
It's part of being old.
Yeah. You let me think. You felt isolated. Did how quickly did it get a little better? Like I know, I'm sure 74 to 75 it was horrible, but did it at least get gradually better living with it, with what happened?
It did. And I was able to just kind of, I thought I'd handled it, but of course I hadn't handled it. I just stuffed it way down
Yeah.
inside where I never
Yeah.
allowed myself to think about it. It wasn't like repressed memories that all of a sudden came out of nowhere. I've
Mhm.
always remembered what had happened. I just refused to let myself think about it and go on with my life.
Were you ashamed with yourself at all?
I just had a whole bunch of just horrible feelings. A lot of it was shame and embarrassment
Yeah.
and why had I been so stupid and guilt when other bodies were being found in canyons and I hadn't told
Yeah,
anybody.
of
And every
course.
time I would just get up my courage and think, okay, I'm going to go do it, then they would get some more information and they knew what I knew, and it would be pointless for me to just expose myself to what I
Yeah.
thought would be all kinds of bad press and stuff if I
Yeah.
came forward.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of bad press, I on Facebook posted and if there's anyone who wanted to have a question for you, and there was one site, and it really it shook me because there was a bunch of you're not, this is a fake story, stuff like that, and so I really want to know how you feel about that.
Well, it's a free world and everybody can believe whatever they want. And
Yeah,
whatever anybody else thinks, whether they believe or not, it doesn't change
of
what the
course.
facts are. It's my truth and they can kind
Mhm.
of believe what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then
But they are right. There's no way of proving it. I've been
yeah,
thinking about those hairs. They found extra hairs in the Ted's Volkswagen when they vacuumed it.
they found
That
in his van too, the van in Florida
Yeah,
as
but
well.
I had never been in the van, but I had been in
Yeah,
the Volkswagen.
yeah.
And I was thinking they should check my hair with those samples that they can't
Right.
match to anybody. But there would be no
Yeah,
point now, and DNA is so
yeah,
expensive to do, and it would prove nothing except that I was in his car at one time. It still
mhm,
wouldn't prove that he'd even attacked me. So,
yeah. And people would just
and
say that.
there's no like medical report, or I didn't go
Yeah.
see doctors right away,
Where
and
did
no,
you go
nobody knew.
straight? Did you go straight to your house after that?
Yeah, yeah. I walked home. It was about 15, 16 miles, something like that. And
Were
took me
you
all night to walk home.
were you afraid that he would be looking for you at all?
Hmm. Of
Yeah.
course, he had, and that went on for a while even after that night because I had a backpack that had my um, driver's license and school ID and stuff in it
Was
that
it
probably was still left
in
in
the car?
the Volkswagen. Yeah.
Do you have any
So
idea, any thought of what he could have done with that at all?
no, I worried a little bit that he would come and get me, but at that point, just immediately after the assault, I wasn't feeling really worthy of being rescued again
Oh,
by
sure.
anybody anyway, and so
Yeah.
I didn't really care if he comes and gets me.
He
I had
comes.
a rat tooth comb. You know what a rat tooth comb is?
No.
It's a comb with a long skinny tail.
Oh
People use
yeah.
it to part their hair and
Mhm.
stuff. And I had a rat tooth comb that I just carried with me when I was running or going to class or whatever. And I thought if he comes up, I'll just stab him with the rat tail comb.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
perfectly safe because now I'm armed.
Right. Um, do you have any, this is my last question. Do you have any thing you would say for younger girls who encounter someone like Bundy?
First of all,
What?
be really careful who you trust.
Yeah.
Bundy was nice looking. He was professional. He wasn't, from one of the weird side groups. You couldn't tell that he was a druggie. You couldn't tell that he
Mhm.
was alcoholic. You couldn't tell anything at all about him. He just looked like a normal
Could you
University
not?
of Utah student.
Yeah. See, I read somewhere that he was always drunk when he'd commit his crimes, and you couldn't smell any alcohol or anything
I
on
didn't
him.
smell any alcohol, but
Really.
I wasn't really used to smelling alcohol. I think I
Mhm.
would have probably noticed
Yeah.
it, but I don't know. I've just been really sheltered most of my life.
And so He just seemed like a very normal person,
Yeah.
and absolutely was
Yeah.
not.
Seemed like very normal person. So be careful who you trust.
Right.
And also if something does, heaven forbid, happen, it's important that you find somebody to talk to about it.
Mm.
Um, all kinds of the police and the fire department and anybody who takes care of emergencies and disasters after they've experienced some kind of a traumatic thing, they are required by their profession, by the police department, by the fire department, to get professional help and talk about what had happened. And
And
when
that's
there's things
yeah.
like a school shooting or something, and teams of psychologists are sent to the town to try to talk to as many people as they can. And the reason for that is because not telling it and holding it inside is one of the main reasons that people get PTSD. And PTSD is just about almost as bad, or in some cases worse than the original experience, because now you're,
You just replay it.
yeah, just replaying it
Yeah.
louder.
And how have you dealt with your PTSD? To have you
I
numbed
had
it?
therapy for a long time.
Uh,
Uh, two different therapists, the one that I talk about in the book, and then I've had a lady, not
therapist.
pharmacist, I'm lady pharmacist, the lady psychologist that talked to me for a while.
Mhm.
She would help me while the book was being published and while I was trying to get guts to go on Dr. Phil and
Yeah, I
all of
watched.
those things. So, yeah.
And so it's gotten a lot better
It's
for sure.
gotten much, much better.
Mm.
Yeah. So now I have some trouble mostly during the anniversary month, which is right now,
Yeah,
but I'm kind of getting past that. My father actually died in October too, so I have a lot of things that have
really. Wow.
happened in Octobers that are make
Yeah,
October's bad the whole
whole
month.
month. Yeah. Well, that's all. That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you so much, honestly.